Hello, my name is Asad Yaqub and I'm from Pakistan. Welcome to IELTS Speaking Part 3. In this video, I'm going to tell you how to get maximum band score using some of my secret tricks in IELTS Speaking Part 3. Let me tell you, IELTS Speaking Part 1 and 2, they are the first and second level. Now, IELTS Speaking Part 3 is basically the third level. It means it's the advanced level, and here the examiner is going to test your ability, how you handle the questions, how you answer the questions. They're going to twist you. They're going to ask you the questions. At times they are the counter questions, and they're going to see how well you understand the questions and how well you answer the questions. Usually IELTS Speaking Part 3 becomes difficult for some candidates, but if you're going to follow my tricks and some of the secret tips, IELTS Speaking Part 3 is going to be easier for you. And I promise, as usual, I'm going to tell you something which you will not find in other videos on IELTS. There are thousands of videos on IELTS, but what I'm going to tell you, that is direct and first-hand information about IELTS speaking. Let's take a start. In IELTS Speaking Part 3, the examiner is going to continue the topic of IELTS Speaking Part 2. Now, if IELTS Speaking Part 2, they ask you about your favorite dish, in Part 3, they're going to talk about the eating habits of the people. They're going to talk about the eating patterns of the people, the cooking patterns of the people, how they are, how they were, and how they are going to be. So remember, in IELTS Speaking Part 3, there is a key, and the key is comparison and contrast. You will have to compare two things in Part 3 and you will have to find the contrast. Now, these two things can be, how is the life in your city? How was it 50 years ago? Now, 50 years ago, you're going to compare present with past. How do you think the life will change after 25 years? Or if they gave you a topic about a technological gadget in Part 2, and in Part 3, they're going to ask you questions about the same type of things. They will ask you, how much do you think people depended on technology 25 years ago? Now, your answer should be in the past tense, and you would say, well, 25 years ago, people this and all that stuff, right? And how much do you think people depend on technology today, right? And then future. So you will have to compare and you will have to find contrast. Get ready. The examiner can ask you one question in the past tense, then the same present situation of that past scenario, and then the future of the same thing. So you need to be ready for this type of thing. There is another thing which is confusing and which actually confuses the candidates. That is, in Part 3, the questions are long. In Part 1, questions are direct. In Part 2, questions are in front of your eyes. You can see them, you can read them. But in Part 3, the questions are long and they do it deliberately so that they see, do you remember the question? Here, you have to have the retention. I mean, if they're asking you the question, you have to retain that very sentence so that you could answer. Sometimes, by the time the examiner finishes the question, you totally forget what the first part of the question was, right? So you need to listen to the question, and let me tell you, develop this technique. Go down the list of questions in Speaking Part 3, and after reading each question, ask yourself a question. What is the question in this question? I repeat, after reading a question of IELTS Speaking Part 3, ask yourself a question. What is the question in this question? Because you know, that very question in the question is the smallest part, right? If they, for example, if the question is, what's your favorite color? They will not ask you this question in Part 3. For the sake of argument, I'm selecting this, all right, so that I could give you the example. If the question is, what's your favorite color? In Part 3, I'm just telling you the psyche of the examiner. The examiner is going to ask you the same question a long way. What type of colors are there that you mostly like and you wear those colors as well, right? Now, there is a long question, and what is the question in the question? Your favorite color. Okay, so when you read the questions, you got to see what is the question in the question and answer that part directly. Now, Part 3 is called discussion. Part 1 is introduction, part 2 is mini presentation, part 3 is called discussion. So the examiner anticipates or expects from you that you elaborate the answers with some detail. That's why, remember, in part 3 your answer should be minimum half a minute. Don't give less than half-minute answer in part 3, because in part 3 that is what we call discussion, and the examiner is expecting from you that you are going to discuss that very thing, or you are going to discuss that very answer. That's what they're going to ask you. So you need to elaborate the things and you can go on. Now in part 3, there is one thing which is really going to help you, which is another secret tip I'm giving you, and I'm giving you all these secret tips because I'm confident about them. I got 8.5 bands in IELTS speaking with this speaking style and with this speaking skill. So you can get even more, okay? So I'm giving you all these tips because I've taken IELTS 2 times and I know IELTS inside out, so that I would like to share all these things with you. Okay, I was telling you the secret tip. You need to categorize your answer. I mean, you know the words for categorize, for the words to categorize your answer, that is first of all, secondly, thirdly, something like that. If they ask you a question, how was life in your country 25 years ago? You can say, well, in my country 25 years ago life was great, first of all. Now after first of all, elaborate the first point. Why do you think life was great in your country 25 years ago? Secondly, now the second point, right, the second option or the second outline, why do you think the life was great in your country 25 years ago? And lastly, so when you are going to, this is called signposting. You have to use the signposting and you need to categorize your answer, because you know when you categorize your answer, then you always have more to say. Automatically your brain generates the ideas. Sometimes in part 3 of IELTS speaking, you might come across this problem of lacking of ideas. So when you are going to go on, you're going to say first of all, secondly, lastly, thirdly, on the other hand, and all that stuff. This is actually going to help you, and then you can give a complete answer. You can easily satisfy the examiner's requirement. So as the questions go on, there is another thing. If you do not understand a question, you might ask the examiner. This is what you can do in part 1 and part 3, because in part 2 questions are in front of you. If you do not understand any question in part 3, you can ask the examiner, and then the examiner is going to repeat that question. But remember, do not expect anything from the examiner. Do not expect that if I don't understand the question, the examiner will elaborate the question. Not at all. They will not even change their tone. If the question is, how do you think people will live 25 years from today? And you say, excuse me, I don't understand. And the examiner says, how do you think people will live 25 years from today? They will not change the tone. They will not change the intonation. They will ask you the question in the same style. So if you do not understand, the first thing is, examiner does not have a fast speed. The examiner has a normal pace. Try to listen to the examiner very carefully. Try to focus on the wording of the examiner. Try to look at the examiner so that you understand. And in your heart, try to repeat the question after the examiner. That will also help you. Don't do the lip sync. Don't say it loudly. If the examiner is asking, how was the lifestyle of the people 10 years from now? Or 10 years ago from now, how was the lifestyle of the people? And now you're repeating, how's the life? The mouth is shut, you're not saying anything, but just you're looking at the examiner and you're repeating all the words of the examiner. That tip is going to help you understand the question and then start your answer. The first sentence of the answer can be taken directly from the question, and then you can elaborate it, you can categorize it. So these are the things. The common problems in part 3 are understanding of the question. Number 2, answers are short, right? The answers are not discussed properly and answers are not categorized. These are the things. If you're going to overcome this, then you will have no problem, and easily in part 3 you can get a good bench score. And let me tell you, if you get a good bench score in part 3, your overall bench score is going to be ideal, because part 1 is going to be simplest one. Part 2 a little difficult, and then part 3 is going to be the advanced one. If you prove yourself in part 3, that means you can end up getting a very good bench score in IELTS speaking. And I say this thing, there are 2 modules of IELTS where with a little extra effort you can get a big response, and that is listening and speaking. I have my videos on IELTS listening as well. Watch those videos and I'll share some secret tips of IELTS listening with you, and definitely IELTS speaking, I've given you all my secret tips. Work out the details. Try to tailor your answers according to my tips. The tips I've given you, your answer should be according to that tip or that trick, and there you will see the result, and then you'll be very happy. If you're going to be happy with your result, you get a good result, write your result down there in the comments and like this video, and you can share this video with others as well. If you have other fellows who are taking IELTS, you can share this video. There is no copyright on this video. You can put it on your page, you can put it anywhere. I don't mind anything, because I have made this video out of excitement, the excitement I got after getting a good bench score in IELTS, and I decided to share all the things and knowledge with you. I wish you all the best, and I wish you 8 bands in IELTS.